Imagine this. You're a highly decorated Army colonel, trained for combat, respected in the highest circles of power. But one night, a routine traffic stop turns into something far more sinister. The cop who pulls you over? He doesn't see your rank, your service, or your sacrifices. All he sees is someone he wants to control. But what happens when the tables turn? When this racist cop pushes too far, he unknowingly picks a fight with a woman who has connections that could destroy him. A woman who isn't just another victim, she's a warrior. And when the truth comes out, he's left stunned, broken, and facing consequences he never saw coming. Would you have handled this situation differently if you were in her shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you love action, suspense, and a story that keeps you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more gripping stories like this. The night was quiet, save for the occasional rustling of leaves and the distant hum of traffic on the highway. Colonel Maya Caldwell had just left a classified meeting at the Pentagon, her mind occupied with details she couldn't discuss with anyone, not even her closest colleagues. As one of the highest-ranking black female officers in the military, she was used to dealing with hostility, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. Her black Chevy Tahoe glided smoothly along the road, cutting through the dimly lit streets. She was dressed in casual civilian clothes, jeans, a simple blouse, and a leather jacket, hardly the attire of someone who commanded respect in military circles. She had no insignia, no uniform to reveal her status. Tonight, she was just another driver heading home after a long day. Then the red and blue lights flashed behind her. Maya glanced at her rearview mirror, her brows furrowing. She was in a good neighborhood, obeying all traffic laws. There was no reason for a cop to be pulling her over. Still, she knew the drill. With a sigh, she flicked on her turn signal and eased onto the shoulder. A police cruiser pulled up behind her, and in the eerie glow of the flashing lights, she could make out the silhouette of a tall man stepping out. The cop's gait was slow and deliberate, almost predatory. She tapped her fingers against the steering wheel, her military instincts tingling. Something about this felt off. The officer reached her driver's side window and rapped on the glass with his knuckles. Maya rolled it down and met his gaze. He was white, bald, and built like a linebacker. His uniform bore the name Officer Briggs, and the way he looked at her sent a chill through her spine. "License and registration," he said flatly. Maya nodded, moving slowly to retrieve her wallet from the glove compartment. "May I ask why I'm being stopped, officer?" Briggs smirked. "You were driving suspiciously." Her hands froze for a split second before she continued her motion. "Suspiciously? I wasn't speeding. I didn't run a light. So, what exactly—" "Don't talk back." His voice had an edge now. "Hand over your license. Now." Maya inhaled sharply but complied, handing him her ID and vehicle registration. He snatched them out of her hand without a word and stepped back toward his cruiser. She drummed her fingers on the wheel. The situation was escalating unnecessarily. She had been stopped before. Every black person had their stories. But there was something about this man's demeanor that screamed danger. A few minutes passed, then 5, then 10. She checked her mirror. Briggs was still sitting in his car. What the hell was taking so long? Just as she considered stepping out to ask, he returned, tossing her ID onto her lap carelessly. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. Maya's spine stiffened. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. Step out of the car." She squared her shoulders. "Under what cause?" Briggs's face twisted in irritation. "Are you resisting, ma'am?" Maya clenched her jaw. The word ma'am dripped with sarcasm, as if he knew she wasn't some ordinary civilian, but refused to acknowledge it. "I know my rights," she said. "You haven't stated any legal reason for this order." His hand went to his holster. "Out. Now." Years of military training took over. She weighed her options. Complying might de-escalate the situation, but the look in his eyes told her he wanted more than just control. He wanted submission. Slowly, she unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out, keeping her hands visible. The moment her boots hit the pavement, Briggs moved fast. He grabbed her arm roughly and yanked her forward, spinning her around. She grunted as he slammed her against the hood of her SUV. "What the hell?" she barked, struggling against his grip. "Stay down." He forced her arms behind her back, gripping her wrist so tightly that pain shot through her shoulders. Maya's patience snapped. Years of combat training surged to the surface. She shifted her weight, twisting her body in a practiced move. Her elbow slammed into his ribs, catching him off guard. Briggs staggered back, his hand flying to his baton. "You just assaulted an officer, lady." Maya turned to face him, her fist clenched. "And you assaulted a U.S. Army colonel." Briggs' smirk faltered for a brief second before he charged. This time Maya was ready. She ducked under his swing, her reflexes honed from years of hand-to-hand combat. She caught his wrist and wrenched it, twisting the baton from his grip. Briggs bellowed in rage. He reached for his gun. Big mistake. Maya reacted instantly. She dropped low, sweeping his legs out from under him. He hit the ground with a heavy thud, his breath knocked out of his lungs. She snatched the baton and pointed it at him. "Stay down," Briggs snarled, pushing himself up. "You're gonna regret this." Maya heard the crackle of a radio from his cruiser. A second later, a voice came through. "Unit 13, status report?" Briggs's face twisted with fury. He yanked his radio free. "I need backup, now!" Maya's pulse pounded. This was bad. She had a choice: stay and deal with whatever reinforcements arrived, or get out before things spiraled even further. Before she could decide, Briggs lunged at her, his fist swinging. She dodged, but his knuckles grazed her cheek, sending a sharp sting through her skin. "Enough!" Maya drove her knee into his stomach, making him double over. She grabbed his collar and shoved him backward. Briggs hit the pavement hard, coughing violently. The distant wail of sirens filled the night air. Backup was coming. Maya had seconds to make a choice. Would she stand her ground, or would she disappear before they arrived? Maya's breath was steady despite the rising tension. The distant sirens screamed through the night, their echoes bouncing off the quiet streets. Backup was closing in fast. If she stayed, she'd be surrounded. If she ran, she'd look guilty. Briggs groaned on the pavement, clutching his stomach where she'd need him. His eyes were full of hate, but something else flickered beneath his rage: humiliation. He wasn't just angry that she had fought back. He was furious that a black woman had bested him in a fight. Maya had no time to waste. She spun on her heel and sprinted for her Tahoe. Just as her fingers reached the door handle, Briggs roared, "You're not going anywhere!" She barely had time to turn before he lunged. Maya sidestepped, but Briggs was faster than before. Fueled by fury, he grabbed the back of her jacket and yanked hard. She stumbled, slamming against the side of her vehicle. Briggs swung his baton, aiming for her ribs. She twisted at the last second. The baton cracked against her shoulder instead, sending a jolt of pain through her arm. Gritting her teeth, she retaliated instantly. Her fist shot forward, catching Briggs under the jaw. His head snapped back, and she followed up with a sharp elbow to his temple. He staggered, but he wasn't down yet. Briggs stumbled, his boots scuffing against the pavement as he fought to regain balance. The baton slipped from his fingers, clattering onto the ground. Maya didn't hesitate. She delivered a swift kick to his chest, sending him sprawling backward. He hit the pavement with a grunt, momentarily dazed. The sirens were louder now, too close. Maya yanked open her Tahoe's door and threw herself inside. She jammed the key into the ignition, and the powerful engine roared to life. Through the windshield, she spotted flashing lights speeding down the road. 3 police cruisers were closing in, their headlights piercing the darkness. Briggs was already scrambling to his feet. He fumbled for his radio, shouting, "Suspect is fleeing the scene. Black female, mid-30s, armed and dangerous." Maya cursed under her breath. Armed and dangerous? He was painting her as a threat, setting the stage for his fellow officers to use lethal force. No time to think. She slammed the Tahoe into reverse, jerking the wheel hard. Tires screeched against the asphalt as the vehicle spun backward, narrowly missing Briggs. He dove out of the way, rolling onto the pavement. Maya shifted into drive and floored the gas pedal. The SUV surged forward, its tires spitting gravel. The first police cruiser swerved into her path, blocking the road ahead. Maya's eyes darted to the side, an alleyway. It was narrow, but her Tahoe could make it. She jerked the wheel and veered sharply. The massive SUV barely squeezed into the alley, scraping against a dumpster as she powered through. Behind her, the police sirens wailed louder. Briggs's voice crackled through their radios. "Cut her off! Don't let her escape. Maya's mind raced. She needed an exit, somewhere to shake them. But they had numbers, radio coordination, and soon they'd deploy roadblocks. She glanced at the dashboard GPS. The map flickered, showing a route to a construction site a few miles away. Perfect. She gritted her teeth and pressed harder on the gas. Behind her, tires screeched as the police tried to follow. But the alley was too tight for their cruisers. They'd have to go around. Seconds later, she burst out onto a side street, taking a sharp right. But she wasn't in the clear. A police chopper loomed in the distance, its spotlight sweeping the area. Maya tightened her grip on the wheel. This was going to be rough. Up ahead, the road narrowed as she approached the construction site. The terrain was uneven, riddled with dirt mounds and half-built structures. She didn't slow down. The Tahoe tore through the site, kicking up dust and debris. The cops wouldn't risk damaging their cruisers in the unstable terrain, not unless they were desperate. Maya glanced in the rearview mirror. Briggs wasn't giving up. He had commandeered an SUV of his own, a black unmarked vehicle, likely a tactical unit. He barreled through the construction site, smashing through barriers and debris. Maya's jaw tightened. She'd shaken off the others, but Briggs was relentless. Then she spotted it, an unfinished overpass leading to the highway. A ramp. It wasn't complete, but it might just be enough. She gritted her teeth, her heart pounding. This was a risk, a big one. She had two options: keep running and eventually get boxed in, or take the jump. She chose the latter. Maya slammed the gas pedal. The Tahoe surged forward, speeding toward the incomplete ramp. Behind her, Briggs realized what she was about to do. "Stop the car!" he shouted over his radio. "She's gonna jump it." Maya didn't stop. She reached the edge of the ramp. And then she soared. The Tahoe lifted off the ground, flying through the air. For a split second, everything was silent. Then, the SUV slammed onto the other side of the highway, its tires squealing as it landed hard. The suspension groaned, but it held. Maya gripped the wheel, barely managing to keep control. She had made it. Briggs wasn't so lucky. His SUV skidded to a halt at the edge of the unfinished overpass. He wasn't stupid enough to try the jump. Maya watched in the mirror as his furious expression twisted in rage. For now she had escaped. But she knew this wasn't over. Briggs would be coming for her. And next time, he wouldn't be alone. Maya's grip tightened around the steering wheel as she sped down the open highway. The adrenaline still pulsed through her veins, but she knew she wasn't safe yet. Briggs wouldn't let this slide. He would twist the story, rally his fellow officers, and turn this into a full-blown manhunt. She needed to disappear. She weaved through traffic, her mind racing for a plan. She couldn't just run forever. Eventually, she had to face this head-on. But first, she had to regroup. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat. Maya hesitated before grabbing it. It was a secured military issues device, one she only used for Pentagon-level communications. If someone was calling on this line, it was serious. She pressed the answer button and put it on speaker. "Go!" A deep voice filled the car. "Colonel Caldwell, we have a situation." Maya recognized the voice immediately. Maya gripped the wheel, her knuckles white as she weaved through the darkened streets of D.C. The Tahoe rattled from the bullet impacts, but it was still running. Her ears rang from the gunfire. But she couldn't stop now. She needed to reach the safe house before the cops locked down the city. Her mind raced. Briggs had the entire department hunting her, twisting the narrative to make her look like a dangerous fugitive. If she got caught, she wouldn't get a fair trial. She'd be a target for an accidental shooting in custody. She couldn't let that happen. She checked her mirrors. The police cruisers were gone for now, but that wouldn't last. Briggs would use every resource to hunt her down. Maya took a sharp turn onto an industrial road. She had scouted this area months ago while setting up her emergency cache. It was the perfect place to disappear. A rundown warehouse loomed in the distance. Her safe house. It looked abandoned from the outside, but inside it was stocked with everything she needed. She hit the brakes hard, skidding into a concealed alley. Without hesitation, she killed the engine and jumped out, scanning the area. Clear. Maya sprinted to a rusted side door and punched in a 6-digit code on a hidden keypad. The lock clicked open, and she slipped inside, shutting the door behind her. Darkness swallowed her. She took a breath, then moved quickly, flipping a switch on the wall. Dim emergency lighting flickered on, revealing a sparse but functional space. A cot, a weapons rack, a computer setup, and a locker filled with tactical gear. She had prepared for moments like this. Maya yanked open the locker, grabbing a fresh set of black tactical fatigues and body armor. Her hands moved quickly, shedding her bullet-riddled jacket and changing into combat-ready attire. She wasn't running anymore. She was gearing up for war. She moved to the weapons rack, selecting an MK-18 carbine and checking the mag, fully loaded. She grabbed a Glock 19, extra magazines, and a combat knife, strapping them onto her belt. Her training kicked in. Every movement was precise, efficient. Then, her computer screen lit up. An encrypted message appeared. Briggs is mobilizing a tactical team. You have less than 20 minutes. Maya's jaw tightened. She had expected a manhunt, but a tactical team? That meant they weren't coming to arrest her. They were coming to eliminate her. She exhaled slowly. If they wanted a fight, she'd give them one. She moved to the warehouse's upper level, taking position near a broken window that overlooked the street. She switched her rifle to semi-auto and steadied her breathing. Moments later, headlights cut through the darkness. Black SUVs rolled in. No sirens, no flashing lights. Briggs wasn't here to make an arrest. Maya smirked. Let's dance. Maya crouched low, her MK-18 steady as she peered through the broken window. The tactical team moved with military precision. 6 men in full riot gear, rifles raised. They fanned out, taking positions around the warehouse. Briggs stepped out of the lead SUV, his face twisted with smug satisfaction. Colonel Caldwell, he called, his voice laced with mockery. You've got nowhere to run. Be smart. Come out now. Hands up. Maya smirked. If Briggs thought she was going to surrender, he had no idea who he was dealing with. She flipped her rifle's safety off and lined up her first shot. Through her scope, she spotted one of the tactical officers inching toward the side door. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked. The officer crumpled instantly, his weapon clattering onto the pavement. Chaos erupted. Contact! One of the officers shouted. Return fire! Bullets tore through the warehouse walls, but Maya was already moving. She sprinted across the upper level, using the shadows for cover. Briggs ducked behind an SUV, barking orders into his radio. She's in the rafters! Flank her from the east side! Maya reloaded, her mind calculating the next move. She couldn't hold this position for long. They had numbers, but she had the advantage. She knew this building better than they did. She slung her rifle across her back and grabbed a smoke grenade from her vest. With a quick pull of the pin, she lobbed it toward the entrance. Thick gray smoke billowed out, swallowing the tactical team in confusion. Maya used the distraction to descend to the ground floor, her Glock drawn. The sound of boots scraping against the concrete told her exactly where her enemies were. A shadow moved through the smoke. She fired twice. A second officer went down, groaning in pain. The others reacted immediately, firing blindly into the smoke. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off metal beams. Maya hit the ground and rolled behind a stack of crates, narrowly avoiding the gunfire. Briggs' furious voice echoed through the warehouse. She's picking us off! Move in! Now! The remaining officers rushed forward, but Maya was already one step ahead. She reached into her vest and pulled out a small detonator. Briggs had no idea she had rigged this place. With a cold smirk, she pressed the button. A thunderous boom rocked the building as a section of the ceiling collapsed, sending debris crashing down. 2 more officers were buried under the rubble, their screams cut short. Briggs staggered back, coughing from the dust. His team was nearly wiped out, and he knew it. Maya emerged from the shadows, her pistol trained on him. It's over, Briggs, she said, her voice cold and controlled. Briggs's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. His confidence was gone, replaced by something new, fear. For the first time, he realized who he had picked a fight with. But this wasn't over yet. Briggs still had one last trick up his sleeve. Briggs' breath came in short, ragged gasps. His tactical team was either down or scattered, and the warehouse was a battlefield of smoke, debris, and blood. The woman he had underestimated, the one he had treated like another routine traffic stop, now had a gun trained on him. Maya's grip on her Glock was steady, her breathing controlled. "You were saying, officer?" she asked, her voice edged with ice. Briggs clenched his jaw, lifting his hand slightly. "You kill a cop. There's no coming back from that." Maya smirked. "Funny, that didn't stop you from trying to kill me." Briggs' fingers twitched slightly toward his belt, toward the concealed blade strapped to his hip. Maya noticed but didn't flinch. She had seen men like him before, cornered, desperate, and still stupid enough to think they could win. Then the distant wail of approaching sirens cut through the night. Reinforcements. Maya's mind raced. She had taken down most of Briggs' squad, but she wasn't invincible. If more cops stormed the warehouse, she'd be overwhelmed. She needed to end this now. Briggs saw the distraction flicker in her eyes and seized his moment. With a sudden, explosive movement, he lunged, his hand darting for the blade. Maya fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. Briggs spun as the bullet tore through his shoulder, sending him crashing onto the concrete floor. His blade skittered across the warehouse, useless now. He groaned in pain, clutching his wound. Maya stalked forward, her gun still locked on him. "Looks like you ran out of tricks," she said. Briggs spat blood onto the floor, glaring up at her. "You don't get it, do you?" he snarled. "I'm not the one you should be worried about." Maya narrowed her eyes. Then she heard it, boots pounding against the pavement outside. Briggs had bought just enough time. A dozen officers stormed the warehouse, their weapons raised. "Freeze! Drop your weapon!" Maya's mind calculated her odds in an instant. She could take down a few, maybe even break for an exit. But against these numbers, she'd be gunned down before she made it 10 steps. For the first time tonight, she hesitated. Briggs grinned through the pain, his bloody teeth showing. "Game over, Colonel." But then, a voice rang out from the entrance. Deep, authoritative. One that made every officer freeze in place. "Stand down." Maya turned slowly. A tall man in a dark suit stepped into the warehouse, flanked by two more figures in military dress. Briggs's smirk vanished. The officers who had stormed in immediately lowered their weapons, exchanging uneasy glances. Maya recognized the man instantly. General Harris. The Pentagon had arrived. Briggs' eyes widened in shock. "What the hell?" Harris cut him off with a single glare. "Officer Briggs, you just made the biggest mistake of your career." Maya exhaled, keeping her gun lowered but ready. This wasn't over yet. Not until Briggs realized just how deep he had stepped into the fire. The warehouse fell into a tense silence. The arrival of General Harris had shifted the battlefield entirely. The cops who had stormed in a moment ago, weapons raised, now stood frozen, glancing at each other with uncertainty. None of them wanted to cross a Pentagon official. Maya kept her Glock trained on Briggs, watching the color drain from his face as Harris stepped forward. "Briggs," Harris said, his voice calm but laced with authority, "you've overstepped in ways you don't even begin to understand." Briggs clenched his jaw, still gripping his bleeding shoulder. "This is police business. That woman is a fugitive. Colonel Caldwell is a high-ranking U.S. Army officer," Harris cut in. "She has Pentagon clearance that outranks every single badge in this room." He turned to the officers. "Did any of you bother to verify her identity before treating her like a common criminal?" Silence. Some of the officers shifted uncomfortably. Harris continued, his voice dropping to a lethal tone. "Do you understand what you've done, Briggs? You put an entire city on lockdown over a false report. You sent a tactical team after a decorated war hero. You abused your badge, and now you expect to walk away?" Briggs's face twisted in rage. "She assaulted me! Maya took a step forward, her gun still steady. "I defended myself," she said coldly. "After you put your hands on me. After you pulled your gun on me for no reason." Briggs glared at her. "You think this changes anything?" He turned back to Harris. "You're just here to clean up her mess. But let's be real. This is my jurisdiction. You can't—" Harris pulled a folder from inside his jacket and handed it to one of the officers. "This is a direct order from the Pentagon, signed and sealed. Effective immediately. All charges against Colonel Caldwell are dropped." He let the words settle before adding, "And Officer Briggs, you're done." Briggs's mouth opened, but no words came out. The officers exchanged glances. Some looked relieved, others stunned. One of them stepped forward and placed a hand on Briggs's arm. "Sir, I think you need to come with us." Briggs jerked away. You can't do this. His voice cracked. She's the criminal. She... Enough, Harris snapped. We've reviewed the body cam footage. Briggs froze. Maya smirked. That's right. Your own camera recorded everything, Briggs. The officer holding the folder nodded. The footage shows you escalating the situation. It shows you pulling your weapon first, making threats, and using excessive force. Briggs' face turned pale. Harris took a step closer, lowering his voice so only Briggs could hear. You thought you were untouchable, that you could harass anyone you wanted, but you made a fatal mistake. You picked the wrong woman to mess with. Briggs turned to his fellow officers, looking for support, but no one met his gaze. He was alone. The officer beside him sighed. Hand over your badge and gun. Briggs's hands shook. You're making a mistake. No, Harris said. You did. With one final glare at Maya, Briggs yanked his badge off and threw it onto the ground. His gun followed. Two officers moved in, placing him in handcuffs. You're under arrest for excessive force, abuse of power, and obstruction of justice, one of them said. Maya lowered her gun, exhaling slowly. It was over. Briggs's eyes burned with hatred as they led him toward a squad car. This isn't over, he spat. You have no idea who I know. Maya tilted her head, smirking. Neither do you. Briggs' expression flickered with doubt for the first time. As he was shoved into the back of the car, Harris turned to Maya. You all right? Maya nodded. Yeah, just another day in the field. Harris chuckled. You do have a habit of stirring up trouble. She holstered her weapon. What now? Harris glanced at the flashing police lights. Now? We go to the Pentagon. There's a lot we need to discuss. Maya smirked. Lead the way. As she walked past the stunned officers, she felt no fear, no anger, just the satisfaction of knowing justice had been served. Briggs had learned the hard way that some people were above his corruption, and Maya Caldwell was one of them. And that's how it all went down. Officer Briggs thought he could abuse his power, but he never expected to cross someone with Pentagon-level connections. Justice was served, and Maya Caldwell walked away, proving that the right training, the right mindset, and the right people in your corner can turn the tables on corruption. What would you have done in her situation? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share for more thrilling stories like this. See you in the next one.